I try to explain this to people and they're like, what's your best bit of advice for setting up a podcast? It's like, investment initially financially, just keep that as low as damn possible. Yes. Forget about the production quality being Joe Rogan-esque or whatever. But my biggest advice, and something I've learned, is that if you're interesting and you're passionate and you've got good guests on, that's the main thing, right? Because again, unless it's a vanity project, it's like, look at me, I'm amazing, right? People go and buy into the story and buy into the journey.
Welcome back to another episode of RecTalk. I'm your host, Nitin Sharma, founder, CEO, and all that good shit of RecTools.io. For those of you who don't know, RecTools is the only whole-of-market directory of your recruitment supply chain. So whether you're looking for the usual stuff, a new CRM, a new telephony system, a new back office provider, you go to RecTools.io. It's free to use and free to browse. And then maybe you're looking for, somebody to make you a new website, looking at outsourcing your marketing. Maybe you're looking at hiring abroad and you want to find out about what the hell employer records are and where to go for that. Go to RecTools.io. It's free to use, free to explore, and start your process from there. And then if you're looking for, a consultancy, somebody to come in and help you with your business from an IT perspective, maybe an L&D specialist like my guest today, get to RecTools.io. The entire supply chain in the recruitment industry, whether you're a talent acquisition leader or a recruitment business owner, they're all there. They all have visibility and are free to access. There's also a range of AI tools and a free job board and a whole load of other cool shit that we've got on there. So that's RecTools.io. That's enough of me plugging my stuff. I am pleased to invite Charles Kyriakou of the 1% Better podcast. You'll know him from, and a range of other stuff which we'll talk about. But effectively, we're going to talk about podcasting today, aren't we? Because we're very like-minded in our approach. I'm fortunate that this platform has allowed me to kind of boost what I do with RecTools and so on and so forth. But I'm sick of talking about how good it worked for me. So it's always good to have a fellow podcaster on.
Yeah, nice.
Charles, first of all, mate, appreciate you making the journey down.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it wasn't the shortest journey, was it? It was
no, I did tell you to get the train. I did warn you.
I literally got into Coventry and I was just like, because I've been to Coventry once and I had a flashback on the M1 because I nearly fell asleep behind the wheel of the car because I went to an exhibition in, I told you about this, the rugby stadium. It's like a famous rugby stadium in Coventry.
Yeah, the Wasps one. Yeah.
They rebranded
what is now the Coventry
stadium. We had an exhibition the day or two before COVID, and obviously you get pissed up with clients the night before. You have the exhibition, and I was like, I'm absolutely knackered, and nearly fell asleep behind the wheel of the car. And then I couldn't find your office today either, so it's just like Christ. But we're here, so yeah, no, thank you very much for having me, man.
The studio is literally across the road from the train station and is a big glass building, and so yeah, the fact that you couldn't find it was hilarious to me. But I get it. You drive. I'm the same. I like driving over getting the train, especially with how fucking expensive trains are.
Yeah, it's a joke.
Right. 1% Better podcast. Tell me about where the concept of that came from for you and sort of what it's done for your L&D and training and development business.
So as I mentioned to you earlier, I've always enjoyed podcasting. I set up a podcast when I was a recruiter called Talking MedTech, and I had to stop during COVID and we weren't agile enough to kind of go around that. But I always like the idea of getting 1% better every day. And bless his soul, my grandfather, my mum's dad, always used to say the day you stop learning is the day you're 6 feet under, and always trying to improve, even if it's by 1% every day, right? And I always liked that. And I'd done a bit of research online, and there's a few different 1% Better podcasts, like 1% Better Life, 1% Better Fitness, but there's no 1% Better Recruitment podcast, right? So I thought, okay, cool, we could certainly give that a try. But as I mentioned to you earlier, and this is people listening that are considering setting up a podcast will also have these thoughts. I don't have the money, I don't have the time, and I don't know what the hell to do, right? So I went to an event and I saw this other guy who's been doing a tech, not recruitment, a tech podcast. And he said literally he has a Blue Yeti. He's like the first mic 90% of people get, a laptop. He does it audio, and that's it. He's like, in terms of the investment I've put in is next to nothing. The time I put in is next to nothing. All I do is I spend an hour recording and I edit. It takes 15 minutes. Like all he does is snip the start, snip the end, maybe use a bit of AI to make sure the sound quality is all good. And that's that. So I was like,
that's the beauty of having a kind of unscripted, uncut podcast like what I do, right?
Yeah.
People are always surprised. I always say it takes me longer to bounce out the final edit of the video and have it kind of come out of the application and ready to upload than it does to actually edit the podcast.
Yeah.
It's so easy, especially when you're like We'll keep in the swear words. We'll keep in the filler ums and ahs. It makes it's more human.
100%. I always make the joke when I've got guests on, because like, you know, I've had a variety of people from like solo founders to like, you know, CEOs and all the rest of it, and they're like, and it just really. Do you mind if I swear? And I went, well, I'm not sponsored yet, not currently monetized, so fucking swear away.
Yeah, no. Luckily for me, so far, touch wood, none of my sponsors have given a shit about it.
Yeah.
In fact, I think it's probably part of the reason that they find it so endearing, because it
seems more human. I find, as long as you don't sound like the most unarticulate person, where every other word, like you sound dumb. Right, you do sound dumb. But if it's like I do this in training all the time, and it makes me laugh when you see directors and managers that will sit in the corner and like be there with the trainees, and then you'll be like, but if you do that, you're gonna fuck up. And the trainers, he swore, like that. But when you use it correctly, it emphasizes what you're saying. If you don't use it correctly, like I said, you just sound dumb.
No, yeah, absolutely right. I used to swear in client meetings. In fact, I remember getting in trouble. Right, this is nuts. So it was in this very building. There was an energy company on the 9th floor, and I used to clean up. Right, I was doing all their recruitment effectively. I was a finance recruiter, but you know, if they needed a data analyst, I'm your man. If they needed a like health and safety manager, I was your man.
Yeah.
And eventually, like the company I worked for cottoned onto the fact that, hang on a minute, Nitin, there's no way this company needs that many credit controllers. So something's going on. So I started looking into it, and long and short, I got told to take the customer service specialist recruiters with me for an intro to the HR manager. And we sat there and we laughed and joked, and I was me, and I swore a couple of times, and I used a word that I wouldn't use now, but to describe like the intelligence level of somebody, right? And look, in retrospect, I wouldn't use that word now because I'm older and I'm a dad, and like, you know, I'm a bit more sensitive with these things.
I'm so curious what this word is now.
Yeah. Mate, I keep getting episode shadow banned, so there's no way I'm saying it. I don't know how Google feel about it. But yeah, we got back to the office and got pulled in by one of the directors, and like, we've just had a complaint. You were so unprofessional. You made the consultants feel uncomfortable. They couldn't believe that that's how you would talk to a client, especially a HR manager.
Really?
And I was like, this is nuts. Like, this is just human. It's not like I was being crass and swearing every other word. But, of course, you know, as you said, emphasising certain words is different. Right, podcasting then. So you've gone, okay, I'm going to do the 1% better one because there's no one in recruitment doing that. So, you know, and you, as you said, low initial investment to get it off the ground. What was the aim? What was the purpose though? What was the, you know, was it a vanity thing? Was it a vanity project for you?
Not even really. I'll be honest. It was a couple of things, right? So when I set the podcast up, I was working with 3 clients. I was working on site 3 days a week, and 2 of the clients, we came to the end of our agreement. They're both very like most of the companies I started working with are all very, very small, like 5 recruiters, and it gets to the end of it, you're like, right, okay, you've run your purpose here, you get your little case study, you move on. And I was like, right, so I've got all this spare time right now, and what's an easier way of getting in front of people? What's an easier way of learning about your market? Because I've been to a few events, they're great, I've made loads of cold calls and all the rest of it, but like, sometimes it's difficult to get through to people, and I just want to have like not a 10-minute conversation when they're busy, and it's like, do you know what I mean? I want to be able to sit down with someone and learn about
actually go into
stuff, and learn about the different markets, because for me, like my biggest insecurity when I got into L&D was I'd done tech sales, like medical technology sales recruitment for 6 years, right? And we did a very wide variety of roles. But going into IT recruitment, Salesforce, cyber, and all, I had no clue. And that was like wrongly so in hindsight, such an insecurity because I don't know the market. And really, to be a specialist, you need to know a lot about the market, right? So the main real reason, weirdly, was that I just wanted to speak to more people and learn more about the industry and just learn different perspectives. And as mentioned to you when we first sat down, you know, I've had consultant sort of ops people, consultant people, that sounds funny, consultant diversity people. I've had CEOs, I've had senior recruiters, I've had DAC recruiters, like anyone within recruitment that has passion and interest, and I would enjoy having a conversation.
You're going to learn something.
And I'm going to learn something. Yeah. And I thought, if I'm going to learn something, then people will probably learn from it. And then after the first few episodes, and I had, you know, a few NEDs on the pod and a few chairmen, and they're like, oh, you know, you're quite good at this, you can monetize it. I was like, oh yeah, shit. Like there could be potential for sponsors down the line. Granted, you're not going to get like millions from sponsors, but like you can generate business from this. Do you know what I'm trying to say? So I thought, hang on a minute, like let's look at my ICP. My ICP is like 5 to 50 head recruitment businesses that have a defined niche. I don't really enjoy. I have done a little bit of work with companies that do your temps and perms and stuff, but like companies that are like have a defined niche basically, that have an interesting sort of USP.
They know they're where they want to be.
Precisely.
Yeah. Okay.
And I thought, right, let's just use this and start speaking to these people, like founders and MDs of companies, and say like, hey, your company looks cool, love your mission, love your values. I'd like to learn more about your business. Do you fancy coming on the show? And also those companies that are hiring as well, like, oh my God, imagine like looking at like we had this before in my old company. My boss was on a podcast, right? People like come to the interview and it was like, oh, I heard your boss on the podcast and he said that, and I really, really bought into him. So I'm getting founders now to come on and just like you said, right at the end of the show, plug your business. Why should people work for you as well? Yeah. You know, so it's kind of a two-way thing, really.
No, I like that. Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because too many people kind of, I feel like too many people start a podcast for vanity purposes. Right?
Yeah.
They're just like, I feel like I've got something to say, and therefore I'm going to say it, which is fine.
Mm-hmm.
But then you're going into it with the expectation of becoming some sort of like thought-provoking influencer.
Yeah.
And then when you don't get the initial traction that you really wanted and hoped for, you give it up. Like the stats are really mad. Like if you can make it to your first 10 episodes, that's a huge success and a milestone, because most podcasts don't make it past episode 5.
I know.
The new ones. And following on from that, you know, most podcasts that get to episode 10 rarely make it to episode 25. Because people just get burnt out and fed up and stuff, which I want to come on to because you did get to that point. Right? Yeah. It's interesting. It's funny. I had a very similar situation in I'd set up RecTalks. I'm like, right. At the time, there was about 800 suppliers on there. There's 800 people here. I could go to the Recruitment Expo and go around and tell every single person about who I am and what I do, but you know, they're here to sell their stuff and to you know, effectively take part in the expo. So it seems a bit, you know, ill-placed for me to go and try and drum up business for me while they're there. So I was like, how the fuck am I going to do this? And I thought, actually, the podcast would be a good way to do that, because that allows me to sit down and have FaceTime with these people and have real detailed chats with these people, learn something from them. But then also they get to learn a bit from me and understanding what I'm like and figure out, are we aligned? Can we do business together? And then fortunately, I've got to a point now where it's sort of like there's not that many people in the recruitment supply chain who don't know who I am, and that I attribute only to the podcast.
Yeah,
like,
nice.
Do you know what I mean? There's nothing more. And
how many episodes are you on now?
Do you know? I've stopped counting. I think we're coming up to 100. Well, I'm
really?
sure. Well,
Yeah, nice.
I'm sure we are, because we do want. We used to release one every week, and I think it's over 100, maybe 110. I think Spotify said 110 the other day. Yeah, I stopped counting because again, for me, that wasn't important. Like I didn't like the whole season and episode this.
I didn't bother with the season. I see some people like season 2, we've got there, and I was like, I don't know, man. I just think the advice that I got from a few people, and I've been listening to podcasts for over 16 years, right? Since Joe Rogan had the Fleshlight sponsor, right? And it's all about just being consistent and just grinding through the early phase, because that's the hardest. Like you said, the first 5 episodes, like when Riverside stopped working, when I bought a mic stand and then the mic wouldn't connect, so I had to use my earbuds, when, you know, you forget to click. There's so many mistakes you make in the early days. You still get great content. You still learn stuff.
I've done it. I had Alex Elliott on, and like what will be 3 or 4 episodes prior to this one, and halfway through our conversation, because we were so engrossed in the chat, I realised I hadn't started the mic. Like literally 20 minutes into the episode, and luckily enough, I filmed from the iPhone, and the iPhone picked up the audio. So the first half of the audio is going to sound dreadful, and then it's going to be like, oh, this is bad. And he watched me go. He literally watched me be like, fuck. And he was like,
shit like that happens, man. But do you know what? That's I try to explain this to people, because I've recently been speaking to a few recruiters that are like, we're going to set up a podcast, like, you know, your one looks really, really good. I was like, does it? Cool, all right. It's literally just all me, but like, all right. And they're like, what's your best like bit of advice for like setting up a podcast? I was like, investment initially financially, just keep that as low as damn possible. Forget about the production quality being Joe Rogan-esque or whatever. People will join your journey.
This is one thing I learned though. Even the biggest podcasts out there aren't overly produced.
No,
they're not overly edited. Joe Rogan's podcast is a 3-hour-long podcast.
Exactly.
And for the most part, it is just the shit chat all
Chris
the way
Williamson's
through.
one of my favourite podcasts. He starts a podcast going, how is AI, and then just go straight into it,
Yeah.
and then it just ends, and then obviously he's got a few ads in there. It's barely edited. Obviously his background and stuff is phenomenal, and I like the way that's his little
Yeah.
niche. But my biggest advice, and something I've learned, is that if you're interesting and you're passionate and you've got good guests on, like that's the main thing, right? Because again, unless it's a vanity project, it's like, look at me, I'm amazing, right? People go and buy into the story and buy into the journey. Like when I said that I was releasing that episode with Sachin, he's a good friend of mine, and he got me into L&D. It's the first face-to-face podcast. It was all in like crispy HD. It was in a nice thing. Good, yeah. People are part of the going to like, fuck me, like his first episode in person.
He's gone from the grainy.
Do you know what I mean? And it's just like, wow, fair enough. And it's
great.
just like, look, we're going to try and do in like the episode 25. I've recorded a 50-second intro to the podcast saying, hey, because normally it's me, I just go straight in, I don't plug the business and stuff. I just want people to just get into the flow of the podcast first, and then eventually we'll get to that. But I recorded a 50-second video saying, hey, just me very quickly, just want to say firstly, thank you so much. It's been episode 25. I'm hopefully this year going to get a sponsor that will allow us to do some more face-to-face. I've got a booth at the expo where we'll do 2 face-to-face podcasts there. So it's just getting people like, look, you're on a journey with me. You're following what this journey is. And yes, it's in my home office. It's like a kind of mediocre 1080p.
But people like it. People like that. People buy into that. I call it the it sounds pretty crass, but I call it the amateur porn effect. Right. So
we spoke about this before.
And there is a science to it, and there's a science behind it, and some of the biggest sites did this research and went, there's this big boom in amateur and explosion of things like OF and that kind of thing was all down to the fact that people seem to prefer not overly edited kind of. In fact, I was joking about this the other day. So I've got my old developer who helped build RecTalk, Tristan. He used to be my behind the camera guy. Like still really good friends with him, and he's looking at coming on board and helping with video editing and stuff. And showed him kind of what we do and things like that. And he was like, this is really funny, because if you look back at some of your earlier episodes, you can tell when you started using professional software, because like you're putting all these cuts and like and it's like you know what I mean? You're like, this is so cool. Like, look, I can make it spin, and like and so you like literally do when you're a kid and you get your birthday, and you get your brand new shoes on, you wear a coat, and you're like, I'll put my hoodie on as well, and walk around and like full kit.
You don't need it all. You just don't need it all. 100%.
You don't. You really don't. I think it's important. I think for people to understand that actually. I say this a lot to the business that I do mentorship with. Start a podcast. You get face-to-face time with clients and prospects. The worst thing I've ever seen people do is they go and start a podcast, and then they invite their existing customer base onto the podcast. And I'm like, well, why would you, like, that's great. That
in the early days when you're trying to get some episodes behind you, fair.
But you don't even need that, though. How many people have you ever reached out to and said, hey, could you like to come on my podcast? And they're saying, no, thank you.
I've had a few, in fairness. I've had a few people that have come back to me and been like, oh, I'm nervous. Or I had a guy the other day that said, what am I going to shout about? I'm here to... It's a cringe, and if he listens back to this, I'm sorry, but he was like, I'm here to make bread and I don't have time. And I was just like, mate, like, it's fine. Like, if you don't want to come on, I'm not going to force you to come on. Like, it's whatever.
Yeah.
I've actually had a few people.
The only person I've ever had to really coax onto the podcast was Mitch Sullivan. And I understand why, because... two things. He's very protective about his image and brand, which I appreciated, and we didn't have a pre-existing relationship, so he didn't know anything about me short of I'm the dickhead and mouths off on LinkedIn, right? Yeah. So he needed to kind of suss me out, and then also he had a bad experience on another podcast, so he was sort of like, look, I don't want to overexpose myself and blah blah blah. Yeah, fair. But I mean, I had like Benjamin Dennehy come on the podcast, like we hadn't released a single episode, and he was like, yeah, I'll come on. Yeah, cool. That sounds interesting. That sounds fun.
Yeah, nice.
And he was a big name at that time. I've never had anybody kind of be like, oh no, I don't want to because your channel's not big enough, or you haven't got enough subscribers.
I haven't had that yet. I haven't had that.
That's what I mean. So actually, more people than not who are comfortable coming on a podcast will say yes.
Yes.
So take advantage of that.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's like,
get FaceTime with people you want to do business with.
Precisely. But the other angle I had as well was that, for example, I had a couple of existing clients come on my podcast.
Yeah.
But they had an incredible story about, setting up a business after being an MD for how many years, not being on the tools for how many years, and billing 500k in their first year, all retained. Mate, like, he's been on a couple of podcasts to tell that story, but I was like, we have an intimate relationship because we worked with each other every single week, and I've worked with all your consultants come on the show, and there will be some clips from that and some like for example, I sit down with recruiters and they're like, oh, how do I go into retain? Go and listen to the episode with Callum and with his BD director Aaron, and they're like, oh, okay, and like people have come back and said, I listened to the one with Aaron, fuck me, his cold call opener is sick. That for me, that's where I'm like, my brain didn't look at that episode as a lead magnet, but that's my bigger, my higher self of like giving more to the industry, if that makes sense.
But you think you went from being a new entrant into the L&D space to then in the same conversations as more established people like your Jeremy Snells and your Bobby Banerjees, and do you know what I mean? That only happens by doing something that's different to everybody else, right?
Yeah.
Same thing with me. I went from literally, and I tell this story a lot. I went to the Recruitment Agency Expo in March 2023, and not a single person really knew who I was. Right,
I had the exact same thing last year in March. Yeah,
and then I'm at the Recruitment Agency Expo in 23 was it, or 24 was it last year? No, it was last year, wasn't it? In October in Birmingham.
Yeah, that's where I met you for the first time.
Yeah, and then I'm podcasting and this, that, and the event, and I was stacked out for 2 days. People were coming over, wanting to chat. I've seen your stuff on LinkedIn. I've seen the podcast. Love this, love that, love this. Yeah. Can we do something? We should catch up.
100%.
And that all can be attributed back down to me using the podcast as a way of building a brand.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. It helps so much with the brand building, right? Because we didn't know each other before I got into the L&D space, but I was that. So I did medtech sales recruitment for about 5-6 years, and that's where I met Hisham, started to learn about personal branding. I was one of the first people in the company to start doing video adverts. So I'd be like, hey guys, today we've got a sales rep role in London, blah, blah, blah. And I started to do some really wacky videos of like the Pret subscription thing and just like, who wants to pay off their mortgage, come to my office, like just some wacky videos. There was no other recruiters on LinkedIn that were doing weird, wacky videos. I was even having like trainee candidates come in and saying, anyone wants to take this candidate, it's completely free. Like recruiters would place that candidate elsewhere because they got PSLs. Didn't care. Like I'm doing my bit, that higher self type thing. And built my personal brand, and I was getting loads and loads of followers on LinkedIn and doing loads of business. And everyone would laugh at me because I'd be sat in the office with my feet up, just like waiting for the phone to ring. Like, and I was the aggressive hunter BD type guy. And people are like, this is really, really weird. I'm like, the personal branding has paid off because it's coming back. And then when I went into L&D, like an in-house L&D role, because I've always wanted to set up a coaching business, like, what the fuck is the point in posting if you're an in-house L&D person? So, like, I was still in that habit of like posting a few days a week, but then I just fell off because I was like, there's literally no point. And all my contacts are sales reps, and now I'm posting about, how to recruit better in IT recruitment. So I was like, this is kind of pointless. And then when I finally set the business up, and after I got made redundant and all the rest of it, I was like, right, I need to get back on the train of the personal branding. Obviously, things had changed and all the rest of it. But yeah, like the first time I went to the Recruitment Agency Expo, like I didn't come from a Charlton Morris or a S3 where like all of the trainees that I trained had set up their own recruitment businesses. I was starting completely from fucking scratch, nothing, right? And then when I see you at Birmingham and you were stacked out with the... Mate, I was going around. I didn't get to do a lap of the bloody place because everyone's like, oh, Charles, all of that. And then now we're in what we now, like February 2025. I'm getting DMs on LinkedIn, mate. It's the most fucking surreal thing of like, I just searched on LinkedIn for recruitment podcast. You were the number 2 one that come up. I see that you got this amount of subscribers. Like, I'd like to come and tell my story and help on.
Yeah.
Huh? It's just weird. Like my wife always says, do you not find it weird that you finish record or you post on YouTube and Spotify and Apple, and like people are like on their way to it listening to like what you've said? I'm like, I try not to think about it.
Mate, it's I had somebody tell me this kind of outside of the recruitment world, right? He made a really interesting point, because he was like, the thing you got to remember with people listening to you as a host on a podcast, most people listen to podcasts in their personal time.
Yeah.
Right? They're inviting you and your guest and your conversation into their personal time.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get that in sales, in business. Very few people would be like, "Oh yeah, come break bread with me." Oh yeah, come and let's have a walk together. Yeah. I'm walking my dog. Why don't you walk with me and talk to me while I'm walking my dog?
Yeah.
But the podcast allows you to do that. You're in these people's minds and their thoughts, and you're provoking conversation in their own mind. Mm-hmm. With the medium of what you do, whilst also building yourself as a person of interest that these people want to be talking to and doing business with, and so on and so forth. Because we all know, and I hate the whole, it's not people buy from people. It's people buy from people like them, or people buy from people they like.
Yeah.
Right? You got to figure out which one of the two you are. Otherwise, you're not going to do business with these people, right? And podcasting is just the way to do that right now. And there'll be a new medium that comes out, right? There always is. There'll be some sort of evolution to this. I mean, podcasting's gone through the evolution of audio only to now audio and visual. You know, my podcast is great on YouTube. I'm fairly certain people aren't sat there watching it. It's just on a tab in the background. Right, I can listen to that while I'm working. Yeah. And I think people have got to evolve, like kind of with that cycle, right?
Yeah, 100%.
But it genuinely surprises me how many recruiters don't use it as a way of getting themselves in front of their clients or prospect clients.
Just think about how many recruiters don't post anything besides I'm recruiting for this one job, which like
and then 15 likes by everybody in the business. I can't believe that still happens.
I know people used to hate me when I used to do like a post about like I do some controversial post and like, you know, just pick a post and then I would say to everyone in the company, everyone like it because obviously it would spread it, and people are like, oh, it's so cringe, like it's just a vanity thing. And I'm like, no, I'm just trying to hack the fucking algorithm here because, you know, I'm aiming to get like 1,000 to 2,000 impressions each post. I'm posting 5 times a week. Basically just means that every single time I make a phone call, I don't have to go, oh, I'm Charles from Projectus. They go, oh, you're that Charles geezer.
Yeah, I've seen your stuff.
I've seen like that. Like I bumped into a guy that was he recruited apprentices, right? And he had to meet me because I came up through the apprenticeship scheme and all the rest of it. And I bumped into him when I was on site in Croydon, of all places. And he went, oh, Charles, you're all right like that. I was like, fucking hell, mate, it's been years. It's been like 6-7 years. He was like, so you got married? So you done this? I was like, okay. And I was like, what? And he was like, bro, like I don't like your post. I don't really like anything. I've followed your whole journey from, you know, leaving Projectus to then joining Lock to then doing your own business. He's like, mate, fair fucking play. That's the shit that's surreal because you're like, fuck, man. Like I say this to recruiters all the time that are like conscious about doing content, let alone podcasts. It's the lurkers, man. It's the people that are just lurking around.
Yeah, the LinkedIn lurkers are the ones where the revenue comes from.
100%.
I get it a lot. The one I get a lot is like, oh my God, you're all over my LinkedIn. You're all over my LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And again, podcasting is such a interesting way to do it because we've now released 2 episodes a week, right? But that's 2 guests who are also circulating their appearance on my podcast to their network and their audience. And that's, you know, this week and then from last week as well. And then people from last week will go, oh, I've just popped it into Opus. What an amazing tool. And they're able to, like, you know, circulate little shorts and stuff. So I'm constantly getting tagged in like content that I've created just sat here.
I know.
Like, you know what I mean?
It's crazy.
And it's out there and it makes life so much easier when look yeah, with RecTalks I don't do any business development really.
It just comes to you.
It's more, yeah, okay, cool. We get it. Yeah, we want to sign up, or no, it's not for us. Fine, cool.
Yeah,
right?
100%.
And I've got a real thing about I only really want to do business with people who I enjoy doing business with. Right?
Yeah, I'm the same. Which sometimes when you're brand new to business can be a detriment because you're like, don't really feel like I align with you, so I'm going to say no. And you're like,
I don't think it is a detriment.
I could have done with that £1,500.
But would that £1,500 come in? Would that, do you know what I mean? Like, would they have paid it? Would they have dragged their heels with it? I'll tell you one thing I've realised since having this mentality of like only doing business with people I enjoy spending time and doing business with. I haven't had to credit control once. If someone is like someone's payment has not gone through for whatever reason, it's usually because the card issue or whatever with Stripe, and they message me about shit. Just realised that the last 2 payments haven't gone through. I'm just going to send them through to you now. But how do I update the card payments? Your details.
Yeah,
that is such a like blessed place to be.
Yeah,
right.
100%.
But again, because of what I do, I don't want to spend. You know, like people who claim their page get 3 sessions of RecTalk with me. That's up to 3 hours minimum of my time in a year. I don't want to spend that with people I don't like.
No,
like, do you know what I mean? I don't want to be sat there. You're 100%. On site 3 days a week with your L&D business, with clients and with people. You don't want to be. You don't want to be with people you don't like 100%. And don't align with, and just there. With
for respect, I spent 2 years working for people that I despised. So we won't say any more about that.
Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean, and sometimes you need those experiences. You need to work with difficult people because then you go actually, and especially if you do go solo or set up your own thing, you go, man, like I was on the train and like standing behind the door before going into the office, like holding tears back and just going, oh, right, you've got this, boy, you've got this, come on, open the door, like, oh, morning everyone. Like, I don't want to do that anymore. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, now I go into business, don't get me wrong, the first few sessions, because it is weird for someone like me, because you're not really part of the business, you're an external. But luckily, because I'm likable, I guess, and all the rest of it, and the recruiters can buy into me. Like, after the second session, you open the door and go, morning. I was like, oh my God, because you only see them once a week, right? And they're learning, you have banter and all the rest of it.
Look, they will know ahead of time. Charles is coming in, he's going to be our L&D trainer. We've hired him. Okay, cool. What's he like? Go and watch the podcast. Go.
Bro, the first client
there was a library of information out there, right?
Yeah, the first client I ever won, I'll make you laugh actually, I'll give him a shout out as well, a company called Big Blue, absolute heroes, lovely company. I saw that Will, the MD, had subscribed to my newsletter, and they do D&B recruitment, design and build. My favourite genre of music, the only genre of music I listen to, is drum and bass. So as a silly little twat, I just DM him going, mate, I've never known that any recruitment business to recruit in the D&B market is unreal. Then I waited 5 minutes and I was like, oh, so embarrassing. I didn't realise it was design and build, whatever. And he came back laughing emojis. It was like, I thought the same thing. It was just like, loving the pod, by the way. And I was just like, mate, your business is class. Like, we should meet up. He was like, yeah, you free tomorrow? I was like, sure. Where are you based? He's like, Aldgate. I was like, sound. Literally went in, met him, met the founder, met a couple of the seniors. We literally spent 3 hours chatting. And then I started working with them. And the first day I started working with them, because what I do is I do the first 2 days or the first day, depending on the size of business, I do one-to-ones with everyone, non-business related. Just get to know you. What's your why? Like, what's your market? Like, just who are you as a person? How do you learn, etc. And everyone was like, oh, Will sent me this episode of the podcast because I predominantly, I have to do BD. So I listened to your episode with Aaron, or, I have some tricky customers. So I listened to this episode. I was like, this is fucking mental. And he was like, I gave them all homework, and it's like, you're going to be sitting down with this guy. He wants to get to know you before he starts working with us and, solidify a contract. So go and listen to his podcast. And as you know, when you do a podcast, after the first 5 minutes, I say this to every guest, you will not realise you're on a podcast anymore because you're having a chat. And if you're good at podcasting, and, we've come from a recruitment background, we're good at speaking, we're good at asking questions,
facilitating a conversation.
100%.
That's it.
100%. And I think where you and I are thriving at the minute, the feedback I've certainly got, and I'm sure you got the same, is the less interviewee and the less overly prepped and overly produced, the better. Because when you're like, right, I'm going to send you a list of 15 questions to go and rehearse from, no. And don't get me wrong, there's a place for it. The world is a giant place. There's always going to be a place for that type of stuff. But not for me.
Yeah, some people are better in that environment, 100%. Right? So I had a certain big name in the recruitment industry, and a former dragon, wanted to come on,
right?
And met with his team, and they were like, "Oh, we'll loop him in if it sounds of interest." Great, cool. No, here's the questions that we want you to ask. I was like,
sorry, wait, what? Who are you, Kamala Harris? Like, what's going on?
Go on then, tell me more. They're like, yeah, and these are the assumed responses that you're going to get, and therefore the follow-up questions are free for you. And I was like, no thanks.
Yeah,
not for me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that's the only way we can make this happen. I understand that, and I do understand that, but unless it's a free-flowing conversation, where I feel comfortable enough to ask, because there are things I want to ask, and there are things that I think need to be cleared up and stuff like that. If that's what you want to do, cool, let's do it. If not, it's not for me, guys. There's hundreds of recruitment podcasts out there, and you can go and do the rounds elsewhere, and I won't be like, I missed out.
Mate, I remember, bless him, Sachin, before we recorded the podcast, he had to postpone a couple of times due to family things. It's absolutely fine. I booked him in for the first ever face-to-face, and he literally sent me a voice note the night before at 11. You just know it's not good news, right? And he was just like, I'm so sorry, but my father-in-law's ill, blah blah blah. And I was like, bro, it's family first, it's fine. Yeah. So I was hunting around for backup guests, and luckily he texted me when he got home that night at 2 o'clock in the morning. He's like, I'll do it tomorrow. And he called me the next morning.
Fair play to him first.
Fair, exactly. I've always had a lot of respect.
That time out, and
I said to him, it's fine, and he offered to pay for it as well. And I was like, mate, it's fine. Family first for me always. It's a massive value of mine. But bless him, for the weeks leading up to it, and on the day, he was calling, texting, voice noting. Right, so how are we going to prepare for this? Have you got a list of questions? I was like, it's actually, mate, whenever we go to the pub and chat, we just end up getting lost in conversation for an hour, right? You know
Same
me, you trust me. When we get to the studio, as soon as we click record and we just get past the intro and the formality, you're going to forget the cameras are on. And when we got to the studio, mate, both of us, because I've never recorded a live podcast being the host in a studio that I've just paid for, and the guys telling us about how everything's working and me and Satchel looking at each other.
Yeah.
Woo,
Imposters.
this is quite real now. And the guy was just,
pair of you sat there like, shit.
And it's just like, I remember we just sat there and then it's like, right,
seriously.
everything's on. We're going to leave the room. If you need anything, let us know. And the on air sign comes on and we just looked. I went, I need to take a breath, mate. I'm like that. And then I remember, because normally in my home setup, I've got one screen, split screen. So you got Zoom on that, and then you've got the notes in terms, because I just have 3 topics. Then the other one is their LinkedIn profile. And then down below is like a white, because my laptop is it's a white screen. So it's better lighting, right? So I always know, right, my topics are here. So, and typically the way I do it is after like the first 5 minutes, formalities are done. Next 15 minutes, topic 1. Next 20 minutes, topic 2. Next 20 minutes, topic 3. And then you close, you plug, and it's done. And it's maximum an hour. I was like, fuck, do I have my phone? Do I have my laptop?
Yeah, where are my notes?
Fuck it. Like, let's just have a chat. And I was like, I would know what we're going to talk about. And it was fucking class.
And that'd be one of your better episodes, because it will
100%.
feel so much more relaxed. I get it all the time. Oh, it sounds like I'm listening to your conversation in a pub. Like that's what it feels like. That's what it sounds like. I'm like,
Mate,
good. That's what you want.
Exactly. I had I was telling you about this guy Liam that I spoke to, and he was giving me the idea about doing the online course and stuff. And I said to him, I was like, mate, like we've only just spoke, right? We obviously we both know Rich and stuff. Like you should come on my podcast, man. Like you've got a wicked business. He's like, like no, I'm not really interested. Like all these recruitment podcasts, it's just how do you do? And it's just scripted. And I was like, oh, you've not listened to my podcast, have you? And he was like, I'll be honest, no. I was like, I've seen your stuff on LinkedIn, but I've not listened to it. And I went, I'll just tell you what happened in my first face-to-face podcast, and then you can tell me your thoughts. I told them about having a spiritual awakening about my dad high on mushrooms in Amsterdam. And he went, sorry, what? And I went, what recruitment podcast talks about, the mental health stuff, and then I had this spiritual awakening, and that's what made me get into therapy. And he went, huh, okay. Yeah, I feel like we should do the podcast. Yeah. It's like, it's not going to be like an interview, like corporate-y. Like, don't get me wrong, there are some people that want to come on and have that chat.
And that works for some of the people out there, right? I don't listen to those ones. To be honest, I don't listen to any recruitment industry podcasts. I get a load of people say to me all the time, like, oh, have you heard this one? Have you heard that one? I'm like, no. Like, I do my work in my working hours, and then I shut the fuck off, right? I don't want to, I don't want to think about work outside of that.
If I see a decent episode with a guest or a title that like resonates with me, like as someone that's constantly trying to elevate, but to be fair, because I'm doing the podcast myself, that's where I get my learning and development about the market. Like when I'm speaking to an MD of a business that's scaled to 20 heads in 2 years, how did you do that? Okay, what was your go-to-market strategy? How do you do BD in finance or in tech, or how is this? What's the nuances there? That's how I'm learning about the market. So sometimes I listen to other recruitment podcasts. Like remember, Leisha's one was the first one I ever listened to, and she had one of the co-hosts of the High Performance podcast. It's all about psychology, and I was like, this is fucking amazing. And then I reached out to her. Hisham recently had not recently, but he had my old sales director on, and I listened to that, and I was just like, oh man, because he lives over in America now. I was like, that's fucking cool, man. But yeah, if I see something that's interesting, then great. If not, then no.
yeah, no, that's it. I'm fortunate because I get to sit with very intelligent people who tell me some cool shit that they've done, and I'm like, oh, I'll take a little bit of that. You know what I mean?
100%.
And I've said it a lot recently. Is like, if I knew back then what I know now, my recruitment business wouldn't have failed. Like there's so much information out there. There's so many different ways of doing things. Yeah. But when you're in this little echo chamber of like, you only know what you know and you don't know what you don't know. Yeah. Yeah. That's where, for me, that's what's driving me, right? I'm like, I need to be that guy that tells other people, because having a failed recruitment business isn't fun. It's not nice. It's not a good experience to go through. I can imagine. Having to let your staff go isn't good. Fortunately, they've all gone on to do well and flourish, and I keep in touch with almost all of them. But yeah, it's frustrating because I look at it and think, fuck, man, if I'd have just invested in my own time, in myself, to either have done this earlier in my career or listen to other people that were out there, I'd have probably been able to turn things around 100%. Relatively quickly.
When did you first get into recruitment?
2014. I got married in...
You got into recruitment in 2014? What did you do before recruitment?
Financial planning. Banking, retail banking.
Right, okay.
So I was a savings and investments advisor, did all my mortgage stuff, and then decided to pack that in And then went down the management route and was running branches and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Then I did a short stint in mobile phone sales again, which I started off as a kid. And then I went into register with Michael Page in their accountancy and finance division because I was like, yeah, I've worked in banking, that's finance, isn't it? And they were like, no, you fucking idiot. Like, accountancy and finance is different. Here's what it is. And we got chatting away, had a laugh and a joke, and they were like, do you fancy doing recruitment? I was like, yeah, go on then. So I got married August 2014 and started when I got back off my honeymoon in recruitment, and then by about mid 2015 I was like, I'm going to do this for myself. This is piss. This is real easy if you've got the discipline and that kind of thing.
Of course.
So I set up my business in 2017. We had some really good years, grew, scaled it, and then ultimately failed it. Had some really bad years. It was a real shame because we went from being very client-centric, client-focused, candidate journey focused, and kind of embedded relationships to, through the pandemic, kind of just surviving and taking a load of like debt to try and scale the project and scale it out to hire people. Didn't have processes in place, didn't have a USP as such.
You hear it
and
so
ended
often,
up, we ended up basically going for low-hanging fruit because we needed to pay the bills, and then that become a vicious cycle of like debt servicing debt, losing staff, hiring staff, losing staff, hiring staff, until eventually you're like, there's no one to rob to play Paul anymore, right? There's no more Peters left, so it become really, really bad. We, as I said, we went from kind of like doing it exactly the way recruitment should be done. We're walking into clients' sites and being like, we placed that entire table over there, that banker desks, all but 3 people we placed. That banker desk, we placed them all, and owning like our patch. To forget low hanging fruit, bro. We were picking rotten veg off the floor. Like that's how we were desperate.
Starving.
We were fucking desperate. And that was never a good thing to be doing. So
because I always say to recruiters that are like starting out in 2025, 2024, and I'm like, there's never been an easier time to get into recruitment, because when I started in 2024 as well as an apprentice in January. There was no bloody podcasts. Like the training that I had initially was a broom closet like this with the ops director, who was basically the sales director as well. And she would just sit in a chair like this, and we would sit on these little stools, and she would read this book and go, an MSP is this, a USP is this, a PSO is that. Okay, until next week. And I just remember coming out of each training session going like, this is not like this is a candidate is a client is a this. It's like, this isn't real training. Do you know what I mean? Like, and you'd go on YouTube, nothing. There's a few Yanks talking about it and all the rest of it. And I moved jobs, and I think it was like the Mike Walmsley VHSs we watched. Not even that old, I'm 31, but like we were faxing, and like I speak to recruiters now, they're like, what's a fax machine? Is that the one where you call it and it goes and you're like,
manual timesheets, paper timesheets, all that sort of shit.
We used to do that.
It's such a great time right now, I think, to be in recruitment, because as you said, like at your fingertips you've got, we've got RecCircle that I've launched recently, and we've got the learning tree. So we've got all these content creators that are out there creating great content for recruiters. We've just put it all in one place, and it's like, just pop your search in. What do you want to know? You want to learn about retained? Click Retained.
Crazy.
Who's your favourite content creator? Oh, you want to see what Charles has or who Charles has spoken to about Retained? Yeah, click that. There you go. Here's all his videos.
It's crazy,
all in one place.
It's crazy.
You'd have paid £100 a month for that back in the day.
Mate, the tools that we had as well. Like when I was the L&D manager, they were investing so much in tech, and I remember thinking, like, I used to sit next to the finance director, and I was like, bro, like these products must be expensive, and there were certain things that I'm like maybe it's just the old school in me that like, do we really need that tool? Like, I don't know, but like if I was to start up as a recruiter again now, and you've got automated email marketing tools that do all that for you, you've got things that create your content for LinkedIn and all the graphics, you've got a power dialer, you've got all these things like tools to listen back to calls with, the analytics. Like my first couple of jobs in recruitment, we had a laptop, or not even a laptop, we just had a computer and a hard phone, and that was it. And we were just texting on the phones. We had no analytics. We had nothing. The director, we had no access to it's just wild to think back to. We had no access to our billings. It was a director would print them off from finance and come along and be like, where's Charles? 7K this week, round of applause. Right, where's Charlie? Right, you, 5K, like that. And I was like, huh? Now you see like bloody TVs, which like you can see everything.
Leaderboards.
There's just so much.
Yeah,
if you really, and I say this to recruiters, if you really, really want it and you're willing to graft and you believe in yourself, because you need those two things. If you don't have both of those, you'll be mediocre at everything. If you believe in yourself and work hard, with everything you have, the tools, the L&D, all this type of stuff, you could earn so much money in recruitment. But then you just hear these people who's just like, do you know what? I really need to earn some money. I might just go and get an easy job like recruitment. You're like, you're an idiot.
Yeah. It was once upon a time. That's the thing. It was once upon a time. I don't think those. I had a really good chat with Mike Ames not long ago, and he was very, very true in what he was saying. He was like, those glory years are done.
Yes.
You're not going to get those sorts of billers anymore. They don't exist. They won't exist. And recruitment business owners need to accept that sooner rather than later. Because you're chasing a fictitious dream, right? You're not going to get a £500,000 a year biller. It's not going to happen, and you are absolutely not going to hire a £500,000 biller, because if they're a £500,000 biller, they're going to be doing it for themselves.
Yeah.
Or you're gonna, there's going to be some way that they can work within a gig economy and not have to, they absolutely aren't going to work for the pittance of wages that you're paying, or the commission structures that used to work. Like the whole market's changed.
Yeah.
So. There you go, mate. Look, this has been fun. I think we should wrap it up here. How do people reach out to you for L&D stuff and training? Kind of, what's the process there?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is probably the best shout. Charles Kyriakou on LinkedIn. I've recently redone my website, got that done properly by Rob Garner. A bit of a plug for him. So you can go to infinitelearning.com. It's awesome. The website looks so good. I'm so happy with it. I've done the website when I first set the business up by myself, and
we all do.
You just have to. But like when I met him at an event, and he was just like, "Oh, I was checking your SEO," and I went, "What's SEO?" And he went, "Oh, bro." And I was just like, cool, I should probably, like, because I always wanted to rebrand the business away from Charles Kyriakou Coaching, because like I mentioned to you before we started recording, is I want to create an online library of videos, because I'm so passionate about like the BD side of things, selling retainers. So I'm going to be working on that this year. I'm currently working on 3 separate in-person courses as well: Mindset Masterclass, BD Masterclass, and the BD Back to Basics. Nice. For people that are like 0 to 1 year's experience.
Like it.
I'm going to hopefully do, as well as the Recruitment Agency Expo, I've got a lady her episode's going to come out soon. She's going to help me do a couple of live podcast events as well. So it'd be great to get you involved in that.
Yeah.
Some ambitious goals that I'm saying out loud now, because if you don't say them out loud, they'll just disappear and you won't ever try and achieve them. But just want to do some more events and stuff. So, but yeah, any recruitment business or recruitment consultant that wants to learn more about coaching, training services like BD specially, mindset, that type of stuff, LinkedIn is your best bet.
Wicked, mate. I genuinely appreciate you.
Yeah, love it. Thank you very much, man.
Come down today, mate. Really do. That's it. I always say that's enough from us, because it slips out like Freudian slip. That's all from us. Thank you very much for listening, liking, watching, subscribing, doing all the cool shit that you guys do to keep us growing and keep us at the top of the recruitment industry podcast game, which isn't that competitive, to be fair. We shall see you again at the next episode. New episodes drop every Wednesdays and every Fridays. That's all from me. Thank you very much. Ciao.
That was
good, man. That was really good.